Hello, class. Um, so this is week 8, and this is day 1 of ELA, and I will read pages 3 to 11 to you. Before I begin reading, I want to review a few of the vocabulary words here in the back of the book, not the back of the room, but the back of the book. Okay, the glossary. The first one is a phrase. It says code talkers, and it is a noun. Code talkers were people, and it says that they were Native Americans who used their native languages as codes during World Wars One and Two. Okay? Glyph. Glyph is a noun, it is a thing. It's a picture or other character with special meaning that is often carved into something. And then the last one is Choctaw. It is a noun as well. A Choctaw is a member of a group of Native Americans in the southeast. Okay. So let's begin reading pages 3 to 11. So the title of this book is Arrows. Okay, and here we go. The first section. The first arrow. Paloma was tossing her new ball high into the Mississippi air when she discovered the first arrow in the forest. On that summer morning, she was aiming for the sun, throwing the ball higher and higher, so when it came down and rolled away, she had only herself to blame. The ball bounced off a tree trunk, flew over a log, and came to rest at the base of a huge boulder. She was digging the ball out from the heavy undergrowth when she noticed the arrow carved into the lower part of the massive rock. The boulder or the massive rock. Paloma grabbed her ball and raced home. Her grandfather was resting on the porch swing. His eyes were closed, and for a moment she wondered whether she should wake him with the news. "You've discovered something," he said softly when she was settled beside him. "I can tell by the way you're fidgeting." "I found an arrow, Papa." Paloma kicked her feet, and the swing moved back and forth, making a gentle, reassuring, squeaking sound. "And where is this arrow that excites you so much?" Paloma told her grandfather about the bouncing ball, about the boulder, and the arrow that was carved near the bottom of it. "Do you think the arrow is a glyph, like the ones in my code books?" Paloma asked. "Maybe it's a Mayan hieroglyphic. The Mayans used tiny pictures instead of words and letters. Maybe they carved that arrow," Paloma guessed. See right here, these are the hieroglyphic. Papa pulled himself out of the swing and smiled down at his granddaughter. "That's a very good question," he said. "But I doubt that the Mayans were carving rocks around here. The Mayans lived farther south in Mexico and Central America. However, your arrow might very well be part of a code of some kind, but we might have to do some research to find out." Paloma's grandfather knew a lot about codes. In fact, he had won a medal for his code work during World War II. Papa and other Native American code talkers had helped the United States and its allies win the war by sending secret messages in languages that people from other nations could not understand. "Will you tell me again, Papa?" Paloma pleaded. Paloma loved to hear the story of the code talkers, even though she had heard it many times. Many times before. She especially liked to hear about the Mississippi Choctaw code talkers, like her grandfather. "Come," her grandfather said, as he took her hand and pulled her from the swing. "I think we should visit this mysterious arrow. I'll tell you about the code talkers while we walk." As they made their way toward the boulder, Papa told Paloma the story of how he and other code talkers sent messages that only other Native American code talkers could interpret. Questions. We spoke into walkie-talkie radios, he explained. There was a coded talker on each end, and we would only use Choctaw words that no one else could understand. Someone would give me the message that I was to pass on, and I would speak the words in Choctaw. The coded talker on the other end would receive my message and translate it into English for the soldiers. If the enemy was listening on the radio, they wouldn't be able to understand what we were saying. Paloma and her grandfather were at the boulder now. They knelt down and Paloma pointed to the roughly carved arrow. Wind and rain had eroded and smoothed the arrow's edges so much that Paloma might not have seen it had she not been paying attention. What do you think it means? She asked. Papa ran his finger back and forth over the carving. I'm not sure, he said. It's a very old carving, but it's hard to determine its age. It takes a lot of work to figure out how old a carving is. How do people know? Paloma asked. Well, there are many ways. Remember the cave paintings we saw last summer and the old fossils and bones we saw at the Natural History Museum? Scientists use a method called carbon dating to figure out how old those things are. Can we use it to tell how old our arrow is? Paloma asked. Maybe someone could date the plants in the cracks nearest to the carving, but that might not necessarily tell us how old the carving itself is, Papa told her. Let's try something else. Let's try studying the arrow as it is. Paloma stared at the arrow for a long time. Suddenly, she had an idea. I know, she shouted. How about if we consider where the arrow is pointing? The arrow was pointing toward another boulder nearby. Paloma and Papa followed it and found the second arrow almost immediately. The second arrow was pointing in the same direction as the first, so they followed that one too. It led to another boulder and another arrow, which led to yet another and then another arrow. There were 6 arrows in all. What do you think it means, Papa? Paloma asked as she ran her finger over the 6th arrow. I think it means we should look for the next arrow, Papa laughed. The arrows are sending us somewhere, and I'm very curious to find out where. They continued on in that direction the arrows had been leading them, but saw no more boulders. The arrows led them straight toward a stream. What should we do? Paloma asked. I guess we should cross the stream. It looks very shallow, so if we tiptoe from stone to stone, perhaps we'll find another arrow on the other side. Hold my hand tight, we'll cross together. Okay, so that's the end of today's reading. It's said to read from pages 3 to 11. And let me plug in my computer. It's about to die. All right. So let me go back to the packet, the ELA packet. And the first tasks, I will not go over them because you're doing the same thing that you've been doing all along. The only thing that changed here is that instead of completing the 4 circle maps, you're only completing 2. And we, Mr. Gonzalez and I, decided to ask you to complete these 2 specific circle maps. The one to study the word or the phrase code talkers, and the one that has interpret. okay, in the middle. But feel free to do the others if you would like to, okay? Especially because it helps you to understand the text a little better. And then you already know that the second task for day one is making inferences, a good educated guess on the reading based on what you are reading and the things that you already know, as in the example that they are giving you here. I can infer that Paloma is close to her grandfather and she loves and admires him because she loves to listen to his stories over and over. And then this is an excellent inference or guess to make. And I agree with that one because, see, the evidence says on page 7, the text says Paloma loved to hear the story of the quoted talkers like her grandfather, even though she heard it many times. So obviously she enjoys hearing those stories. And then I know that when I was younger, I loved hearing my grandma's stories about her life over and over because we were close and I loved and admired her. So because of these two things, we can make this inference that Paloma is close to Grandpa and she loves listening to his stories. So you do the same thing, begin with making an inference, and then look for your evidence, and then your what you already know. Okay, to put together that inference, and again, you only make one inference, and then we get to the writing, the 3-step process writing, and here's your prompt. It says, why? Why did the United States use code talkers during World War II? There was a section in the reading that said or explained why they used these code talkers or how using code talkers was helpful for the soldiers to win the war. Okay, so you can begin by turning the question into a statement here for the answer right here. It says, why did the United States use code talkers? Okay, so we could say the United States used code, and it's capitalized because it's a special name of these people or the title that these people had, okay, to do this job. So the United States used code talkers during World War II, and I guess I could say here because blank. Okay, so that's going to be your job to go back to the reading and find out why. If that word because, if it doesn't fit your own way of saying why they use them, then you don't have to include the word because, okay? But that's just to remind us that we need to find out why they used code talkers. That was towards the beginning of the reading, I remember. Okay. I forget, you would have to reread it in here. Okay, so here, let me grab my pencil right here. Come on, okay, here, pencil. Right here. So this is one possible section that you could look at, okay, that explains why or how code talkers were helpful at that time. And then, but there's also, for example, right here, it mentions code talkers. So look at those sections and see if you can find out why. And then you finish your response right here. And then, of course, then you will need your evidence. Okay, so details and evidence. Grab my pencil again. All right. So this you already know. We've been doing this all along. You need evidence and details, at least 3 of them, okay, to support your response here. And again, you could use evidence and your own explanation. Okay, and you do the same thing for each of the two remaining boxes. And then once you do that, then you put it into complete sentences here to write. If you need more space, please get a separate piece of paper and finish your writing in there. And that's it for day one.